says, and look, don't get me wrong, there's an element of skill certainly that comes into play, but what if two players are evenly matched in terms of skill, but one player just happened to have more money than the other? Eurogamer makes a note of this. If I go online in a competitive game of FIFA Ultimate Team, as many millions of people do, and I see the squad of my opponent, I do not know if that person has obtained that squad by spending money on loot boxes or has obtained that squad through gameplay. So I could lose to that team who is being played by someone who has a similar skill to me, who has an advantage because they have better players, faster, more powerful, better players. I don't know if they have thrown £1,000 since the game has come out at FIFA and obtained those players through loot boxes. I have no way of knowing. That is an inherently pay-to-win experience. I don't know how you can deny that. And you can tell Bruzo really has no argument against this. He brings out statistics again. Well, 9 out of 10 FIFA Ultimate Team packs are bought with FIFA Ultimate Coins. Yeah, that's fine. There's still that 1 out of 10 packs that are bought with real-world money, and 1 out of 10 is a significant enough figure. And Eurogamer says, but my opponent might have been the 1 out of 10. And Bruzo insists, well, we have studied this, we study this constantly, and I assure you, FIFA Ultimate Team is far and away a game of skill, and the player skill is by far the fundamental contributor to the player success rate, not answering the point, what if two players are evenly matched, one of them just happens to be rich or addicted enough that they spend all this money on the best players. What then? This player has paid to win. They have gambled to win. How does Bruzo not see this point? Or rather, he sees the point, he just refuses to actually address this because he knows that doing so would screw him. Eurogamer then brings up regulators. Research done by UK universities came out and said that there was a link between loot boxes and gambling. Are they wrong? Bruzo responded, we also have lots of regulators who have come out to say that loot boxes are not gambling. Correction, that said that within the current language of the law, loot boxes aren't considered gambling. That doesn't mean that they aren't actually looking into it. That doesn't mean there aren't concerns, and that doesn't mean there aren't considerations to change the law to reflect the fact that loot boxes look, sound, and behave and affect people exactly like gambling does. Or at least similarly enough that they cannot go entirely unregulated. Bruzo continues, and researchers too, there actually isn't consensus at this point on this topic. In Australia, in France, and Sweden, and Denmark, all the regulators have all said, no, we're not going to regulate this under gambling laws. I'm gonna quote Bruzo here and say it's interesting that you gloss over the fact that there are tons of articles out there detailing how kids in particular have gone on a spending spree, not knowing any better, without that impulse control. It's funny that you should gloss over, Bruzo, the fact that when FIFA players were interviewed, teenagers in particular, but also adults, when they were interviewed about FIFA and whether they believe that this is a pay-to-win game, most of them have pretty much said, yeah, it's frustrating. This is pay to win, and it does feel like gambling. The Children's Commission in the UK, I believe, straight up got testimonials from a bunch of FIFA players, many of them young, and they have corroborated the sense that this is pay to win and gambling. But none of that goes addressed because that's what EA does. They are very selective about the feedback that they take. It's all about that confirmation bias rather than actually looking at the full picture because of that green, that cheddar, that money. Bruzo then says, I'll speak for myself. When I hear about an individual who spent too much time or too much money in FIFA, it pains me. Oh yeah, I'm sure you lose sleep over that. It drives us, actually. We don't want that. I'm sure Andrew Wilson is so concerned about this issue. We're not building the game for that.
Activating kill mode.
Really? No. Shut the hell up. The game is strictly built for that. In fact, a presentation, a PowerPoint slide of some sorts, I remember leaked about how their ultimate goal is to drive as many players as possible from other modes to FIFA Ultimate Team, their big moneymaker. This is exactly what they want. They want players to get hooked to this stuff. They want that engagement, as they call it. So it drives me to want to encourage things like again, FIFA playtime dashboards, to encourage parental controls, to spend real dollars with organizations like Internet Matters, to massively increase awareness around how many controls parents have around spending, not just in our game, but in all games. So we're ready. We will work on real solutions, but we need to get to some kind of consensus. So listing out a bunch of minimal actions and initiatives that they've taken that ultimately have had no significant impact, and then saying until a consensus is reached, we're not going to change how we do things. A righteous entity won't wait until the law tells them that something's wrong before they realize something's wrong and stop it. They will stop the thing that's wrong because they see that it's wrong, and they know it's a moral obligation. And EA and FIFA, well, you know, moral obligation is certainly not at the top of their list of priorities. Eurogamer then brings up the point that multiple UK organizations have said the same thing, backed up by thorough research by 2 respected universities. If there is a chance that they're right, that they could affect children in this way, that children are most at risk of becoming problem gamblers as a result of loot box design in FIFA, Peggy 3 game for everyone, even if there's a small risk, don't you think it would be the right thing to do to change the way the game works? I love this question. Bruzo responded with this: kids should not be spending in our game. Children should not be spending in FIFA. Straight from the horse's mouth, except here's the hypocrisy and contradiction. It wasn't so long ago that when FIFA was confronted by UK regulators, they said that FIFA loot boxes, that FIFA card packs, are akin to Kinder Eggs. You know, the chocolate that parents tend to purchase for kids. And it was outright stated, we don't believe that loot boxes are harmful for kids because these are fun surprises. So you've got Bruzo here saying one thing and other executives saying something else. The common thread here is that EA says whatever they need to say to the audience that they need to appeal to. So with the journalists, you'll say, oh yeah, no, children shouldn't be spending in our game. But then when faced with regulators who are trying to regulate how children do engage with FIFA loot boxes and spend money aggressively because they don't know any better and don't have impulse control, to the regulators they'll say, oh no, it's just Kinder Eggs. It's exactly like that. It's for kids. It's totally okay. Totally harmless. But here, by EA's admission, kids should not be playing in our game. Except EA doesn't give enough of a shit to do anything about it. They'll be happy to retain that Peggy 3 rating or that E for everyone rating for their soccer games that are rated lower than Pokemon Red, which is utterly ridiculous. They're more than happy to maintain the status quo regardless of the harm that they're causing. So saying the words is one thing, taking action is another, and EA has certainly not taken action, though this right here, this could be potentially used in court to bring up that EA has admitted by their own words that kids should not be spending in our game, and that could potentially move forward the initiative of changing game ratings to reflect loot boxes. Hopefully this quote yields something. This is not an insignificant quote to have as ammunition. Eurogamer then brings up, but kids do spend. They shouldn't be spending, you say, but they do. Bruzo said, well, we see very low percentage of accounts of people under the age of 18. Again, bringing up the argument, well, it's a minority of people, so who cares about those people, even though it is still a significant portion of people, even though you're still harming people. And the fact that this guy can have that mentality, well, if it's a minority of people who are getting harmed, then what's the problem? Like, that goes to highlight the executive mentality and how disconnected this guy is as a human being. I mean, if this guy cared about people and, you know, wants to present himself as also being a human being, then he has to also show that he cares about other human beings. And then he says, but most importantly, our default is set to no spending for accounts under 18, and we work with Sony and we work with Microsoft to also institute spending controls as a default for children. Kids should not be spending in FIFA, full stop. Instead of implementing systems that don't ultimately work, how about just changing your game to reflect that E for everyone rating, or increasing the rating of your game to reflect the fact that there is gambling in there and that it is an adult game? I mean, and when you say kids, by the way, kids, the definition, technically, under 18. Teenagers are considered kids as well. They spend money on FIFA as well. So, in a way, you're saying, you're right, this game should be rated 18+, so why don't we get there instead of just saying the thing that people want to hear? Now, here's a big hitter. Oh, I love this question. You say kids should not be spending in FIFA, then why did you advertise FIFA points in a children's magazine, which I did cover in a previous video, and they 100% did this, and they got enough backlash that they actually had to pull out from that. Chris Bruzo said, let me say again, we are human. That was my team. That was my team that did that. It was an oversight. How can that be an oversight? It was literally somebody checking boxes of places to put FIFA ads, and then a process by which we normally review where those ads are going to, and we missed that step. We have apologized. We said it was a mistake. We do make mistakes, Wes. The mistake wasn't that they accidentally put the ad in the children's magazine. The mistake was that they overstepped, and then they took a step back because they realized, oh, no, we probably shouldn't do this. Regulators will really encroach on this. these were calculated moves with calculated intentions. And when the clapback got a bit too much, they pulled back. That's not a mistake. That is just steering the ship another way to make yourself look good. Eurogamer then brought up a quote from the House of Lords Gambling Committee's report on loot boxes. If a product looks like gambling and feels like gambling, it should be regulated as gambling. In response, Chris Bruzzo said, "You don't have a way of cashing out. Isn't that fundamentally what gambling is?" So this is one of the issues with the current definition of gambling, this idea that you have to be able to cash out for it to be gambling, when all that is required is for somebody to want something badly enough that they'll keep spending money for the chance to obtain that thing.